Did you get to be a bird guy?
Well, I started out over 50 years ago with Edith Andrews.
Really?
And Edith was a young woman then. She was still, actually when I first met her, she was pregnant with Ginger.
Yeah.
And so Ginger wasn't born yet. Ginger's now, I'm afraid, over 50.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's a safe way to say that. But anyway, I was 12, 13 years old, and I proved to be good at identifying birds. And then I got all kinds of positive reinforcement from her and from other people. And, you know, birds are interesting. Birds are kind of an avocation that you can, you know, follow through life. You can have a bird feeder. You can go on bird watching trips. You can write books
really?
about birds.
You wrote a book, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm working on the 5th book in the Year of Birding Nantucket series right now, actually.
All books on Nantucket?
Yeah, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 6 or 7 books on Nantucket birds right now, already written.
What more can you?
Well, there's more birds to write about. There's you know, there's a lot of birds come and go here on Nantucket, and they're not always the ones that we'd expect to find here. Mm-hmm. We had a birding festival here in October with Linda Loring Foundation and Vern Locks, and amazingly, a whole bunch of very rare birds showed up for that bird festival.
They heard about it.
Yeah, it's almost like good vibes. I mean, we had that magnificent frigate bird that showed up the day before. Jeff Carlson, I guess he's the beach manager, was walking along the waterfront and looked up, and there's this magnificent frigate bird flying over. And it's one of those things, you know, if you've had a drink at lunchtime, you'd probably be wondering if it was affecting your perception. But a frigate bird is, you know, extremely different from anything else you'd see. It's got a 7 or 8 foot wingspan. The wings are
that big.
Wings are incredibly long and thin. They have an incredible glide ratio. Did you ever have to fly in a glider? Did you ever have to?
Oh yeah.
Do that sort of thing? So you understand? How about a sailplane?
No.
Sailplanes. When I was at the Air Force Academy, they used sailplanes to teach.
You went to the Air Force Academy?
Well, I was on the staff.
Oh, okay.
So yes, I did go there, but not as a student. You know.
I see. I was wondering, hasn't been around.
As a student of English,
years.
yes, I went there, but no, I was not a student. I was there 4 years, though. It was really good duty.
What'd you teach them?
I was in personnel. I was hiring people and firing them and promoting them and testing them and that sort of thing. There are about, there's 4,000 cadets, and there's probably 1,500 regular Air Force personnel that work at the academy.
Really?
So, good,
that's a small
I was there
university.
69 to 73.
Do they have a graduate school also?
No.
Oh, it's strictly undergraduate.
The equivalent would be the War College, if you're familiar with.
Newport, yes.
Well, I think ours is in Kansas. But anyway, and the Air Force Academy was still fairly new then. It's the newest service academy. Initially, they were on kind of a regular college campus in Denver until they built the site in Colorado Springs. Highest in altitude college campus in the country, 7,200 feet. So consequently, when people come to play football there or basketball,
you've got an advantage.
Yeah, you'd think so. But anyway, I got to work with the Falconry program while I was there. The Falcon is the mascot of the academy, and so one of the activities the cadets have is probably 30 or 40 of them that participate in the Falconry Club, and they run what we call a muse, where you keep your falcons. And a lot of the freshmen don't know about these things, so you have to train them how to handle a bird. And I don't know if you had any experience with falconry, but it's much more demanding than being married, I'll tell you that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember how demanding that might be, Whitey, but you have to pay a lot more attention to a falcon than you would a marital partner. And even though we all know you have to pay a lot of attention to a marital partner, don't we? But anyway, we train the cadets with prairie falcons. Prairie falcons are pretty common out there. It's a big brown falcon, very fast. And they fly them. They have a cadet standing with a lure that he swings. And you don't let your falcon fly unless it's hungry. So one of the things you do all the time is weigh your bird to make sure, you know, he's not too fat, because if he's too fat, he'll just become enamored with flying around and may not come back. So anyway, they associate the lure with food, and the cadet would swing the lure around, and you try to pass the falcon 3 or 4 times before actually giving him the lure. So he'd be holding the lure out like this, and the falcon's coming in at 100 miles an hour, low across the ground, and the last minute the cadet would swing the lure out of the way, and the falcon would fly by looking over his shoulder, mouthing words of disdain. And then they'd come back and make another. Eventually you give them the lure.
How do you know the falcon isn't going to hit you?
They're pretty good at what they do.
I see.
Yeah, unlike the mourning doves, this morning something scrambled the mourning doves out. I don't know if you know mourning doves, but have you ever been in a state where they hunted them?
I've been down in Central America. We went out hunting doves.
I was shocked when I was in Texas. They hunt them there. They hunt them in Georgia. And when you hold a mourning dove in your hand, you understand why you would hunt them. It's a very heavy bird. There's a lot of meat on a mourning dove.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're a predator, a mourning dove's a good thing to catch. And so something scrambled the mourning doves at my feeder this morning, and one hit the window, bam. And sometimes they leave a dove-shaped mark on the window. You know, it's like a crime scene evidence sort of thing. But they fly, you know, when a predator comes, they fly off, and if there's a building in the way, they'll fly right into it, or a window, or whatever. You know.
Can we hunt doves?
Not on Nantucket, not in Massachusetts. It's not a game bird in Massachusetts. But
now tell me about the falcons. Do we have a falcon out at the airport? I know we've got a muse. You call them muses?
A muse is where you keep your falcons, yeah. And Jeff Marks is a falconer.
Yeah.
And he has a peregrine falcon there. I think the original idea was to train that falcon to scare birds away from the runway that might hit airplanes.
Yeah. And is it scaring birds away from the runway?
I don't think the plan has been put into practice yet.
I see.
Okay, it's a very handsome bird. You know, a peregrine falcon is magnificent.
But it's out there in the muse?
Yeah, it's out on the east side in the the maintenance area of the airport.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, near Jeff's office.
I see.
There's probably 5 or 6 falconers on Nantucket.
Yeah, you got Dr.
Leprery's got a red-tailed hawk named Ajax. Yeah, very.
Now, how do they keep the birds from hitting the planes nowadays? I know they used to have a lot of problems with that. Is that improved, or is it just...
Well, you can't train them. You know, it's there are certain times a year when there are a lot of birds out around the airport.
Yeah.
And I remember a few years ago there were 2 sandhill cranes that had decided the airport was a good place to be. And there's little wet areas around the runways.
Yeah.
A crane is a big bird.
Yeah.
And so you wouldn't want to hit one of them. Even a gull is a big bird. And I think there's probably a fair amount of gull strikes. The good news is we haven't had one that, was severe enough. Of course, it's never good for the gull. But there are also times of the year when there are thousands and thousands of tree swallows around. We've actually driven around out there, and the ground has been like carpeted with tree swallows, and that's if ever a bunch of them got sucked into a jet engine, that wouldn't be good at all.
Now, what does the FAA do about something like that? Do they prohibit flying when you have a bunch of tree swallows out
I'm not aware that they do, but one thing they've done is forced us to take. They had bird houses on the fences around the airport, and for bluebird boxes, mainly used by tree swallows, because there's very few bluebirds on Nantucket. But they made them take all the bird houses down. The bird watchers are they just decided that you couldn't do something around the airport that would promote birds being at the airport, even if those birds were probably not going to be a problem for airplanes. It was just the idea of it. So the birders were not thrilled.
I remember taking off from Boston once, and one of the Cape Air planes, and we must have hit a bird because it stopped the prop and the plane went over like this, and then it righted itself again.
And the engine started again?
The engine didn't stop, it just slowed it up, and the torque did it. And the comment was, well, that one didn't survive, but it didn't knock us down. It just put torque on the plane.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm always worried about that. And then didn't a bird get swallowed taking off from Boston once and caused an accident?
Well, I'm thinking the classic one is the East River accident where what was the pilot's name that landed the plane in the East River? And
that was a bird?
That was a flock of Canada geese.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I'll do a public service announcement here. It's not Canadian geese. It's Canada geese. That's not sounds very grammatical, but that's the way it is. Also, we don't have seagulls here. We have gulls. And we call them seagulls, but they're really not.
They're really gulls. They're
really shore gulls. You get more than 10 miles away from shore, you don't see many gulls. So.
I see.
But I digress.
Now tell me about the old squaws. Why don't we see old squaws here this year?
Well, we had 57,000 of them, I think, on the Christmas bird count. So they're around. They're just not as predictable as they have been other years. Other years, I think, where they were going to feed every day, which is probably 40 to 60 miles south of Nantucket, they were going to a concentrated area. So they were going from Nantucket Sound, where they like to spend the night, to this area, south of Nantucket, and they were following pretty concentrated route back and forth. That just makes them easier to count. I think there's every bit as many longtail ducks. We have to call them longtail ducks now.
Now, who decided that? I mean, is that one of the birders, or
there's an international
sort of like calling Pluto
a planet versus whatever. This is a bird that exists circumpolarly around the world, so they exist in Asia and Europe, where the term squaw never really came into fashion. So, of course, it's kind of a pejorative term. We don't have squaws anymore. But I'm probably going to get myself in trouble here if I talk long enough. But anyway, they call them longtail ducks over there, and so they changed the name.
I was driving along the Nantucket Road today, and I saw 6 crows attacking 1 rabbit. Now, is that common, or what's happening to the crow population?
It must have been a really good rabbit, maybe a nice and fresh one that the vultures hadn't gotten to yet. Actually, I heard someone say there are hardly any crows around, but I'm aware of a crow roost where there's at least 1,000 that come and
Where is it?
roost every night. I can't tell you on the air because apparently people want to go out and shoot these crows.
They're shooting.
It is legal to shoot crows most of the year. I mean, I'm not saying it's a great thing, but it's apparent people view crows as pests, and so they make it okay legally to shoot them. Despite all this, crows prosper, and there are a lot of crows around, and crows like to sleep with other crows, which goes back to the intermarriage thing, I suppose. We'll get back there eventually. But so they like to get together with a whole bunch of other black feathered creatures, and a lot of them sit on the ground and sleep. They actually sleep in the sand dunes. But they all want to get together. And if you go and visit a crow roost when they're coming in, it's reminiscent of some of the scenes you remember from the Alfred Hitchcock movie, The Birds. But anyway, our crow is Corvus brachyrhynchus is the American crow. There's a very rare crow that sometimes appears here called the fish crow, which is a more southern crow. It likes shorelines.
Do the crows migrate?
Some crows do, and some crows don't, and I don't know how they decide.
How the crows decide.
And same with blue jays, and even robins. Again, some of them migrate, some of them don't.
The robins are around here.
Red-tailed hawks, some of them migrate, but the ones that you got a pair out in the Nantucket area right now that are already working on their nest and copulating. That's one of the favorite words that Edith Andrews taught me when I It was very titillating when I learned about copulation. But anyway, it would seem early, in the year for that sort of activity.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to raise young hawks, so they have to lay their eggs early. They have to hatch. They're typically hatched by in April, and it takes probably till July before the young hawks are ready to go and fly away on their own. So, but there's a nice pair. The picture was in the paper last week of the two of them, and they'll stay together all year, but they only get amorous, from December through March, and then it takes 2 adult hawks to raise chicks in order to catch enough food for themselves and to feed the youngsters. So, they're together probably 8 months of the year, and then the other 4 months they're wandering around doing hawk things.
Do they switch partners?
Typically not, unless one of them dies.
Mm-hmm.
And a red-tailed hawk, well, pale male, the one they follow in Central Park, is now at least 22 years old.
That's the one that hangs out over the buildings?
Yes. Yeah, he's on his third or fourth mate. Yeah, and we don't know whether there was foul play. I hate to say that, or what happened, or whether just maybe she saw a better looking hawk. I don't know, but he's on at least his third mate. And there's a guy that photographs him every day. There's a website. You can go palemail.com.
He hangs out the same building, the same...
Yes.
Yeah.
What building is that?
Mary Tyler Moore lives there. I know that. I can't remember exactly which building. It overlooks Central Park.
Yeah.
And the building residents at one point had the nest removed, and then there was a huge furor. Well, you have to imagine living underneath a red-tailed hawk nest is not really great. I mean, they poop, they excrete the parts of the prey that they can't digest. It's just not. You really want to have an umbrella going in and out, I would think. Yeah.
It's not good for property values.
I didn't know where we were going to go with this, but here we are. Do you want to talk about intermarriage or?
No, I think we've run out of time.
Oh, we could do that another time.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we've got to end this because we're running out of tape. But I really appreciate you being here, Ken, and it's always fun.
We must come sometime and talk about wind turbines.
Well, I try not to on the show here, but we will.
Okay.